I never thought a decorative fountain would be my breaking point. But when I pulled into my driveway that Tuesday afternoon and saw it sitting right on the corner of my property, something inside me snapped. My name is Zachary Coleman, and I bought my house in Scottsdale, Arizona 3 years ago. It was a modest two-story home in the Sunset Ridge community, nothing fancy but mine. The neighborhood was decent enough when I moved in. Sure, there was a homeowner association, but they seemed reasonable at first. That changed when Brenda Patterson took over as HOA president 8 months ago. Brenda was everything you would imagine when you picture the worst kind of HOA president. She was in her late 40s, wore too much makeup for the Arizona heat, and drove a white BMW SUV with a bumper sticker that said, "My other car is also better than yours." Her blonde hair was always done up in that specific way that screamed she wanted to speak to every manager in a 50-mile radius. I stood there in my driveway, keys still in my hand, staring at this monstrosity. It was not a small fountain either. This thing was at least 6 feet in diameter, made of some kind of fake stone material that was trying and failing to look like marble. Water spurted from 3 tiers, creating this constant splashing sound that I knew would drive me insane. The worst part was the location. It sat directly on the corner where my property met the community's common area. Actually, scratch that. As I walked closer, I realized it was not just near the corner, it was actually on my property. A good 3 feet of this fountain was sitting on land that I owned and paid taxes on. I pulled out my phone and opened the property survey I kept in my files. I had learned early on with this HOA that documentation was everything. Sure enough, the fence line that marked my property extended well past where this fountain sat. My phone rang before I could take any photos. It was my buddy Marcus from work. "Hey man, still coming to the game tonight?" he asked. "I do not know any more. The HOA just installed a giant fountain on my property." "Wait, what? On your property? Can they do that?" "That is what I am about to find out." I spent the next hour taking measurements, photos, and comparing everything to my property survey. There was no question about it. The fountain was definitely on my land. Not on the property line, not in some disputed gray area, but clearly and undeniably on my property. The next morning, I knocked on Brenda's door at 9 o'clock sharp. She lived 4 houses down from me in one of the larger homes in the development. When she opened the door, she was already dressed like she was about to have lunch with the governor, complete with pearls and heels. "Zachary," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "What can I do for you? You can remove the fountain you built on my property." Her smile did not falter. "I am afraid I do not know what you are talking about." That fountain was installed on community property as per our beautification initiative. I pulled out my phone and showed her the survey. "This survey says otherwise. The fountain is 3 feet onto my land." She barely glanced at the screen. "Our records show that corner as common area." "Perhaps your survey is outdated." "My survey is from the county assessor. It is the legal property line." "Well, Zachary, if you have a concern, you are welcome to submit it in writing to the HOA board. We meet the first Thursday of every month. Your complaint will be added to the agenda." She started to close the door. I put my hand on the door frame. "Brenda, I am not waiting a month. That fountain needs to be removed now." Her fake smile disappeared. "Remove your hand from my door or I will call the police, and the fountain stays. It is community property and it is beautiful." Several residents have already complimented it. Several residents do not have it taking up their yard. "Good day, Zachary." She shut the door in my face. I stood there for a moment, taking deep breaths. Getting angry would not help. I needed to be smart about this. Back home, I called the county assessor's office. After being transferred 3 times, I finally got someone named Patricia who actually seemed interested in helping. "So they built a fountain on your property without permission?" she asked. "Exactly. And the HOA president is refusing to remove it." "Well, Mr. Coleman, you have a few options. You can file for a formal survey to be done by the county, which will take about 2 weeks and cost $300. Once that is done, if it confirms the fountain is on your property, you can file a complaint with the county and they will order it removed. 2 weeks, minimum. Could be 3 depending on the surveyor's schedule." I thanked her and hung up. 3 weeks was a long time to have a fountain blasting water on my property, but it seemed like the official route was my only option. That afternoon, I paid the $300 and scheduled the survey. The earliest they could come was 12 days away. For the next week and a half, that fountain haunted me. The sound of running water was constant. I could hear it in my bedroom at night. It was the first thing I heard in the morning. My water bill had not come yet, but I was curious who was paying for all that water usage. I did some investigating and found out the fountain was connected to the community's irrigation system, which meant technically, all of us were paying for it through our HOA dues. That was adding insult to injury. On day 8 of this nightmare, things got worse. I came home from work to find a parking violation notice on my truck. According to the notice, I had parked illegally in the fire lane and needed to move my vehicle immediately or face a $200 fine. The problem was my truck was in my driveway. My driveway that was definitely not a fire lane. I marched down to Brenda's house again. This time her husband answered. Greg was a quiet guy who always looked vaguely embarrassed by his wife's behavior. "Is Brenda home? She is at a board meeting. Is something wrong?" I showed him the parking violation. This was on my truck, in my driveway. He took the notice and read it, his face going red. "This is a mistake. I will talk to her." "I appreciate that, Greg." That evening, Brenda herself showed up at my door. She had another board member with her, a woman named Diane who was in her 60s and seemed to just agree with whatever Brenda said. "I understand there was an error with a parking notice," Brenda said. "Please disregard it." "How did that error happen?" "Our parking enforcement volunteer must have been confused. It happens." "Your parking enforcement volunteer thought my driveway was a fire lane." "These things happen, Zachary. We have apologized. There is no fine. I do not understand what else you want." Deanne nodded along like a bobblehead. "I want the fountain off my property." Brenda sighed dramatically. "We have been over this. The fountain is on community property. Your obsession with this is becoming concerning. Several neighbors have mentioned that you have been acting erratically." "Which neighbors?" "I cannot divulge that information, but there have been complaints. Now, if you will excuse us, we have other homes to visit." They left, and I stood there wondering if I was losing my mind. But no, I had the survey. I had the measurements. The fountain was on my property, and these parking violations, these complaints from nameless neighbors, this was all retaliation for me daring to question the HOA. The county surveyor came on day 12, just as scheduled. His name was Robert, and he was a no-nonsense guy in his 50s who clearly had dealt with HOA disputes before. "Oh yeah," he said, looking at his equipment. "That fountain is definitely on your property, by about 2.5 feet. Want me to mark it, please?" He spray-painted a bright orange line showing exactly where my property line was. The fountain sat clearly on the wrong side of it. "I will have the official report ready in 3 business days. You can pick it up at the county office." "What happens then?" "You file a complaint with code enforcement. They will notify the HOA and give them a timeline to remove it. If they do not comply, they get fined daily until they do." Finally, some progress. 3 more days and I would have the official documentation I needed. That night, I barely slept. Not because of the fountain noise, though that did not help. I kept thinking about what came next. The HOA would fight this. Brenda was not the type to admit she was wrong. Sure enough, when I went out the next morning, the orange spray paint line was gone. Someone had scrubbed it away. The grass was still slightly discolored where it had been, but the line itself was gone. I took photos of the discolored grass and sent them to Robert the surveyor. He called me back within an hour. They tampered with a county marking. That is actually illegal. You want to file a complaint about that too? Let me get the survey results first, then I will decide. 3 days later, I picked up the official survey from the county office. It was beautifully official, with stamps and signatures and technical language that all boiled down to one simple fact. The HOA had built their fountain on my property. I made 5 copies of the report, one for me, one for the HOA, one for code enforcement, one for my lawyer, and one just in case. Then I went to code enforcement and filed my complaint. The woman behind the counter, whose name tag said Linda, looked over my paperwork and sighed. Sunset Ridge HOA. Yeah, you know them. We have had several complaints from that community lately. New president is apparently very aggressive with rule enforcement. That is putting it mildly. Well, this is pretty cut and dry. We will send them a notice of violation. They will have 10 business days to remove the structure or face daily fines of $500. $500 a day. It is a structure built on private property without permission. The county takes that seriously. I left feeling better than I had in nearly 3 weeks. Finally, something was happening. The notice went out the next day. I know because Brenda showed up at my house at 7 in the evening, waving the paper around like it was on fire. "This is harassment," she yelled before I even fully opened the door. "It is a legal property line dispute. You went behind the HOA's back and filed a complaint with the county. I went through proper legal channels because you refused to acknowledge that you built on my property. That fountain is beautifying this community. Everyone loves it except you. Then move it 6 feet south and it will be on community property. Problem solved." She jabbed her finger at me. "Do you know how much that fountain cost? $8,000. We cannot just move it. You should have checked property lines before spending $8,000. Other neighbors were starting to come out, drawn by Brenda's yelling. I saw Greg hurrying down the sidewalk, looking mortified. "This is not over," Brenda hissed. "The board will fight this. You have 10 days before the fines start." Greg reached us and gently took his wife's arm. "Brenda, honey, let us go home and discuss this calmly." She shook him off but did start walking away, muttering threats about lawyers and countersuits the whole way. Over the next week, things got weird. I started getting violation notices every single day. My mailbox was supposedly the wrong color. My house number was not visible enough. My trash cans were out too early. My grass was too long. My grass was too short. My car was too loud. My porch light was too bright. Every single violation came with a $100 fine. I called my lawyer, a guy named Tom Chen who had helped me with my house purchase. "They are retaliating," he said after I explained the situation. "Keep every single notice. Do not pay any of the fines. We can use this. Can we stop them from sending more? I will send them a cease and desist letter. It might slow them down." The cease and desist went out and the violation notices stopped. But something else started. My car got keyed. Nothing dramatic, just a long scratch down the passenger side. Could not prove who did it, but the timing was suspicious. Then my trash cans went missing. Both of them. Just gone one morning after trash pickup. I filed a police report for both incidents. The officer who took my statement looked tired when I mentioned the HOA. Let me guess. Sunset Ridge? How did you know? We have been getting a lot of calls from that neighborhood lately. HOA disputes mostly. Not much we can do unless you have proof of who is doing this stuff. So they can just keep harassing me. Document everything. If it escalates, we can look into charges for harassment or vandalism. But right now, it is your word against theirs. The 10-day deadline came and went. Code enforcement confirmed they had sent the violation notice. The fountain remained. Linda from code enforcement called me. They are not complying. Fines start tomorrow at $500 per day. They were informed of this. What if they still do not remove it? Fines keep accumulating. Eventually, the county can put a lien on the HOA's assets or force removal themselves and bill the HOA. I did not think it would go that far. $500 a day was serious money. Even for an HOA with a decent budget, that would add up fast. But the fountain stayed. Day after day, it sat there on my property, water splashing away while the fines piled up. I found out why when Greg came to talk to me. He showed up on a Saturday morning looking nervous. Can we talk? Off the record. Sure, come in. We sat in my living room and he explained. Brenda convinced the board to fight this. She told them the survey was wrong, that you had somehow manipulated it. She has the board voting to pay for a lawyer to challenge the county's findings. The county survey is official. You cannot challenge facts. I know. I tried to tell them that. But Brenda has most of the board convinced that this is about more than the fountain. She is telling them if they back down on this, residents will stop respecting the HOA's authority. So they are going to keep paying fines until the lawyer tells them they have no case, which could be weeks. Maybe longer. Greg, why are you telling me this? He looked uncomfortable. Because I live here too and this is getting out of hand. Those fines come out of our HOA budget. That is money that was supposed to go to repaving the roads and fixing the community pool. Now it is going to pay for Brenda's ego trip. After Greg left, I sat and thought about the situation. The fines were accumulating, but my property was still being occupied by an ugly fountain. Code enforcement was not going to physically remove it anytime soon. The system was working, but slowly. Too slowly. That is when I started really looking at the fountain, studying it. The water had to come from somewhere and go somewhere. I followed the pipes and found they connected to the irrigation system, just as I had suspected. The drainage from the fountain ran to a pipe that fed into the community's drainage system, which eventually emptied into a retention pond at the edge of the development. I looked at my property survey again, this time focusing on the drainage. There was a natural slope to my property. If water came from the fountain, it would naturally flow toward the community parking lot, which sat about 50 feet away at a slightly lower elevation. An idea started forming. A terrible, petty, probably not entirely legal idea. But then again, they had built on my property, harassed me, damaged my car, and stolen my trash cans. Maybe it was time to stop playing nice. I spent the weekend doing research. I looked up water rights, drainage laws, and property owner responsibilities. In Arizona, property owners had the right to redirect water on their own property as long as it did not cause undue harm to others. The key words were undue harm. Water flowing to a parking lot probably would not count as undue harm. Inconvenient, yes. Harmful, probably not. Monday evening, after it got dark, I went out to my shed and grabbed a shovel. I started digging a small trench from the fountain's drainage pipe, redirecting it toward my property, and then angling it toward the community parking lot. It took me about 3 hours. My back ached and I had blisters on my hands, but I got it done. I covered the trench with some boards and grass clippings so it was not obvious what I had done. Then I went inside and waited. The next morning, I woke up early and looked out my window. Water was flowing exactly where I had directed it, running down the slight slope toward the parking lot. It was not dramatic yet, just a steady trickle making the ground muddy. I went to work and tried not to think about it, but I could not concentrate. Around 11, my phone rang. It was Marcus. "Dude, are you seeing the neighborhood Facebook page? I am at work. What is happening? The HOA parking lot is flooding. There is like 3 inches of water covering half of it. People are losing their minds." I tried not to smile. That is weird. Yeah, Brenda is going crazy. She is posting like every 5 minutes about how this is unacceptable and someone needs to fix it immediately. When I got home that evening, I drove past the parking lot first. It was worse than I expected. The water was ankle deep in some spots. The fountain had been running nonstop for weeks, and all that water had been draining away efficiently through the underground pipes. But now, with my redirection, it was all going to one spot that was not designed to handle that much water. Several cars were parked at the edges of the lot, trying to avoid the deeper puddles. Orange cones had been set up around the worst areas. I parked in my own driveway and went inside, feeling satisfied but also slightly guilty. I had caused a problem for the whole community, not just Brenda. But then, I reminded myself that they could have just removed the fountain at any time. This was still ultimately their choice. That evening, there was an emergency HOA board meeting. I got the notification by email. All residents were invited to attend. I decided to go, curious to see how they would handle this. The meeting was held at the community center, a small building near the pool. About 30 residents showed up, which was a big turnout for an HOA meeting. Usually, only the board members and a couple of busybodies attended. Brenda stood at the front, looking frazzled. Her hair was not as perfectly styled as usual, and her makeup looked rushed. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," she began. "As many of you know, we are experiencing a drainage issue in the parking lot. We have had a plumber out and they are trying to locate the source of the problem." An older man in the back raised his hand. "Why has not this been fixed yet? My car was sitting in water for 6 hours today." "We are working on it, Gerald. These things take time." A woman in her 30s spoke up. "I heard the fountain might be causing it. Is that true?" "We are exploring all possibilities," Brenda said tightly. I raised my hand. Brenda's eyes narrowed when she saw me. "Yes, Zachary. Have you considered removing the fountain? Especially since it is on my property and you are being fined $500 a day for keeping it there." Several people turned to look at me with interest. Apparently, not everyone knew about the property line issue. "The fountain is on community property," Brenda insisted. "Despite what some residents claim. The county survey says otherwise. I can show anyone the official documentation if they want to see it." "That survey is under review by our attorney," Brenda said. "So you are spending HOA money on lawyer fees while also paying $500 daily fines, and now dealing with a flooding parking lot. That seems like a lot of money being wasted instead of just moving a fountain." The room erupted in conversation. People were not happy. Gerald spoke up again. "How much have we paid in fines so far?" Brenda hesitated. "That information will be in next month's financial report." "How much?" Gerald insisted. Deanne, the bobblehead board member, whispered something to Brenda. $7,500 so far, Brenda admitted. The room got louder. People were angry. $7,500 was a lot of money. "That is almost as much as the fountain cost in the first place," someone yelled. "We are standing on principle," Brenda said. "We cannot have individual residents dictating where community beautification projects can be placed." "But it is his property," Gerald said. "If the county says it is his property, then it is his property." Our lawyer believes we have grounds to contest the survey. I stood up. The survey is from the county assessor. It is official. No lawyer is going to change that. You are throwing money away out of stubbornness. Sit down, Zachary. You have already spoken. I will sit down when you remove the fountain from my property. More people started speaking up. The meeting devolved into chaos. People were demanding answers about the budget, the fines, the flooding, the fountain. Brenda tried to maintain control, but she had lost the room. The meeting ended with no resolutions. Brenda announced they would have another plumber come look at the parking lot drainage and table the fountain discussion for the next regular board meeting. I drove home feeling like maybe public pressure would accomplish what legal channels could not. But I was wrong. The next morning, the fountain was still there, still running, still draining onto my property and then flowing to the parking lot. The plumber came and went. According to the neighborhood Facebook page, which I had finally joined just to watch the drama, the plumber said the drainage system was not broken. Water was just flowing to the parking lot from an outside source. Brenda posted that they were investigating where the water was coming from. I waited for someone to follow the obvious trail from the parking lot back to the fountain and then to my property. But apparently, no one did. Or if they did not say anything. The parking lot remained flooded. The fines kept accumulating, and Brenda kept refusing to admit defeat. A week after the emergency meeting, Greg showed up at my door again. He looked exhausted. "I know what you did," he said quietly. My stomach dropped. "I do not know what you are talking about. The drainage. You redirected it, did not you? There was no point lying." "Maybe." "I am not going to say anything. Honestly, at this point you have every right, but I wanted to warn you. Brenda hired a private investigator. She is convinced someone is sabotaging the HOA and she is determined to find out who." "A private investigator? Are you kidding me?" I wish I was. "That is another $2,000 from the HOA budget, by the way. People are going to lose it when they find out." After Greg left, I went outside and looked at my handiwork. The trench was pretty obvious if you knew to look for it. I had tried to cover it, but water had washed away most of the grass clippings. If a private investigator came looking, they would find it pretty quickly. I needed to make a decision. I could undo the trench, let the water drain normally and go back to waiting for the system to force the HOA to remove the fountain. Or I could double down and wait to see what happened. I thought about my keyed car, my stolen trash cans, the harassment, the violation notices. I decided to double down. That weekend, I reinforced the trench. I lined it with plastic sheeting and covered it with decorative river rocks, making it look like an intentional drainage feature. If anyone asked, I was just managing water drainage on my own property, which was completely legal. The private investigator came on Monday. I watched from my window as he walked around the parking lot, took photos, and then started following the water trail. He ended up at the fountain, then on my property. He knocked on my door 20 minutes later. "Mr. Coleman, my name is Dave Richardson. I have been hired by the Sunset Ridge HOA to investigate the parking lot flooding." "Okay. I notice you have a drainage feature on your property that leads from that fountain to the parking lot." "I have a drainage feature on my property, yes. I installed it to manage water runoff from the HOA's fountain, from water that is landing on my property. What I do with water on my property is my business. The HOA believes you are deliberately causing the parking lot to flood. The HOA believes a lot of things that are not true, like that fountain being on community property." Dave pulled out a tablet and showed me photos. "This drainage feature was not here 2 weeks ago based on neighborhood security camera footage. It appeared right around the time the flooding started. I am allowed to make improvements to my own property. Improvements that damage community property could be considered vandalism. Redirecting water on my own property is not vandalism, and the parking lot is not damaged. It is just wet. Dave stared at me for a long moment. The HOA is prepared to take legal action. Great. I will see them in court. While they are at it, they can explain to a judge why they built a fountain on my property, refused to remove it despite a county order, and have racked up thousands in fines. He put his tablet away. I will include this conversation in my report. You do that. After he left, I called Tom, my lawyer. They hired a private investigator, he asked, laughing. It is not funny. He figured out what I did. What you did was manage water on your own property. That is legal. The fact that the water then flows somewhere inconvenient for them is not your problem. They are the ones with an illegal fountain causing the water issue in the first place. So I am okay, legally? Yes. But Zachary, this is escalating. Are you sure you want to keep poking this bear? They poked me first. I know, just be careful, document everything. The next few days were quiet, too quiet. The fountain kept running. The parking lot stayed flooded. The neighborhood Facebook page was full of complaints about both issues. Then on Thursday, I came home to find the police at my door. My heart raced as I parked. 2 officers stood on my porch. Zachary Coleman, one of them asked. That is me. What is this about? We received a complaint about property damage. Mind if we come in and talk? We sat in my living room and they explained. Brenda had filed a police report claiming I had vandalized community property by deliberately flooding the parking lot. I redirected water on my own property, I explained. I am allowed to do that. The officer, whose name tag said Martinez, nodded. We spoke with code enforcement. They confirmed the fountain is on your property and should not be there. They also confirmed that property owners are allowed to manage drainage on their land. So why are you here? Because a complaint was filed. We have to follow up. But based on what we have found, no crime has been committed. The parking lot flooding is a civil matter between you and the HOA. The second officer, a younger woman named Riley, added, For what it is worth, the HOA president was pretty aggressive in demanding we arrest you. We explained that is not how it works, but she insisted we at least come talk to you. That sounds like her. Do us a favor, though, Martinez said. Try to resolve this before it gets more out of hand. We have been getting a lot of calls from this neighborhood lately. After they left, I was relieved but also angry. Brenda had tried to get me arrested. This was beyond petty HOA drama now. This was personal. I posted in the neighborhood Facebook group for the first time. I laid out everything. The property survey, the county order, the fines, the harassment, the false parking ticket, my keyed car, my stolen trash cans, and now the false police report. I attached photos of the survey, the code enforcement violation notice, and the police report number. I have been trying to resolve this reasonably for over a month, I wrote. The fountain is on my property. The county has confirmed this. I have every right to manage water on my property. The parking lot flooding is a direct result of the HOA refusing to remove an illegal structure. This is what your HOA dues are paying for. Thousands in fines, lawyer fees, and private investigators, all because one person refuses to admit they made a mistake. The post blew up. Within an hour, there were over 100 comments. Most were supportive. People were angry about the money being wasted. Several people shared their own stories of Brenda's harassment. A few people defended her, saying HOAs needed strong leadership and residents needed to follow rules. But they were definitely in the minority. Gerald commented, "Emergency meeting this Saturday. Going to demand a vote of no confidence in the current board." Saturday came, and it seemed like the entire neighborhood showed up. The small community center was packed. People were standing along the walls. Gerald had organized everything and came with printed handouts showing the HOA budget, the fines paid so far now over $10,000, and the legal facts about the property line. Brenda tried to start the meeting, but Gerald interrupted her. Point of order. I am calling for a vote of no confidence in the current board leadership. That is not on the agenda, Brenda said. I am putting it on the agenda. According to the HOA bylaws, any member can call for a leadership vote with a petition signed by 20% of residents. I have signatures from 35%. He held up a thick stack of papers. Brenda's face went red. This is a coup. This is democracy, Gerald replied. The board works for us, not the other way around. The next hour was intense. People spoke up about their frustrations. The wasted money, the petty enforcement, the harassment of residents who questioned anything. Several people mentioned receiving violation notices for minor or even made-up infractions. One woman tearfully described how Brenda had threatened to fine her for having a political sign in her yard during an election, even though that was protected by state law. When it was time to vote, the result was overwhelming. 78% voted to remove Brenda as president. Diane and 2 other board members resigned rather than face votes against them. Gerald was elected as the new president. His first official act was to approve removal of the fountain. It is on Mr. Coleman's property. The county has confirmed this. We have no legal right to keep it there. It will be removed within 48 hours. The room applauded. I felt a huge weight lift off my shoulders. Brenda stood up, her face twisted with rage. You are all going to regret this. That fountain was beautiful. This neighborhood is going to fall apart without proper leadership. Proper leadership does not mean harassment and power trips, Gerald said calmly. You are welcome to stay in the community, Brenda, but your time on the board is over. She stormed out, and I swear I heard someone quietly cheer. True to his word, Gerald had a crew there Monday morning. They shut off the water, disconnected the fountain, and hauled it away in pieces. They even repaired the damage to my lawn where it had been sitting. The parking lot flooding stopped immediately. I filled in my drainage trench and planted new grass seed. The neighborhood started to feel normal again. Gerald ran the HOA with common sense and actual respect for residents' rights. The focus shifted to actual community needs, repaving roads, fixing the pool heater, organizing neighborhood events. But the story was not quite over. 2 weeks later, I got a call from Linda at Code Enforcement. Mr. Coleman, I wanted to give you an update. The HOA has paid all outstanding fines totaling $14,000. The violation is now cleared. That is great news. There is one more thing. The former board president, Brenda Patterson, has been charged with filing a false police report. Apparently, she filed several false reports, not just against you. The police are taking it seriously. What kind of charges is she facing? I am not entirely sure of all the details, but I know false reporting can be a misdemeanor. She might face fines or community service. Just thought you would want to know. I did want to know. After everything she had put me and others through, there was some satisfaction in knowing there were actual consequences. A month later, I ran into Greg at the grocery store. He looked lighter somehow, less stressed. How are things? I asked. Better. Much better. Brenda is barely speaking to me because I did not defend her more at the meeting, but honestly, that has been nice too. Sorry if I caused problems in your marriage. He shook his head. You did not cause anything. This has been building for years. She gets obsessed with control and power. It happened at her last job too. She got fired for harassing a coworker. I thought maybe the HOA position would be a good outlet for her energy, but it just made things worse. What is she doing now? working with a therapist, actually, court-ordered as part of her false report charges. She is angry about it, but maybe it will help. I do not know. I hope things get better for you. Thanks, and hey, sorry about everything she put you through. I should have stood up to her sooner. You warned me when you could. That helped. Life settled into a comfortable routine. The neighborhood thrived under Gerald's leadership. Someone started a community garden. The pool got fixed and became a popular hangout spot. People actually talked to each other instead of everyone staying isolated in their houses, afraid of getting violation notices. I even joined a neighborhood watch committee, which was ironic considering how much I had fought with the HOA just months earlier. One evening, I was watering my front lawn when a family pulled up to the house that had just gone up for sale 2 doors down. They got out, looked around, and seemed excited about the neighborhood. The husband walked over to me. "Hi, we are thinking about buying the house down the street. How is the neighborhood? How is the HOA?" I thought about everything that had happened. The fountain, the harassment, the flooding, the dramatic meetings, the resolution. The HOA is pretty good now, I said honestly. They are reasonable and actually care about the community. But let me give you some advice. Always know your property lines, document everything, and do not be afraid to stand up for yourself if something is not right. He laughed. Sounds like there is a story there. There is, but it ended well. That is what matters. They ended up buying the house. Nice family with 2 kids who loved using the community pool. As for Brenda, I saw her occasionally around the neighborhood. She never made eye contact, never acknowledged me. She had gotten community service for the false police reports and was required to attend anger management classes. According to neighborhood gossip, she was trying to start a new HOA in a different development, but no one would give her a board position. Some people never learned. Greg and Brenda eventually separated. He stayed in the house. She moved to an apartment in Phoenix. He seemed happier, started coming to neighborhood barbecues, even dated a woman who lived across the street. As for the fountain, I heard Gerald sold it to a golf course for $2,000. The money went back into the HOA budget, a small recovery from the massive amount Brenda had wasted. The spot where it had sat on my property became a small flower garden. I planted desert wildflowers and some cacti. It looked better than a fake marble fountain ever had. 1 year after the whole mess started, I was sitting on my porch with a beer, watching the sunset paint the Arizona sky in shades of orange and pink. Marcus came over and joined me. "Remember when you called me about the fountain?" he asked. "How could I forget?" "Did you ever think it would turn into all that?" "Not at first. I just wanted it moved. But looking back, I am kind of glad it happened the way it did." "Glad? You got harassed, had your car keyed, and had to deal with months of drama." "Yeah, but the neighborhood is better now. Gerald is a good president. People are happier, and everyone learned that the HOA does not have unlimited power. Residents have rights. That is an important lesson." Marcus clinked his beer against mine. "I guess. Still seems like a lot of trouble over a fountain." It was never really about the fountain. It was about respect, about following the rules that are supposed to protect everyone, not just enforcing arbitrary power. Deep thoughts for a Tuesday night, I laughed. I've had a lot of time to think about it. The next day, I got an email from code enforcement. They were doing a follow-up survey on resolved cases and wanted to know if I was satisfied with how everything had been handled. I wrote back that while the process was slow and frustrating, ultimately the system worked. The county enforced property rights. The legal channels, while tedious, provided the documentation needed to prove my case. And the community came together when they saw what was really happening. Linda wrote back, "Glad to hear it worked out. FYI, Your case has become a training example for how to handle HOA disputes. Thanks for your patience with the process." That made me smile. Maybe my ridiculous fountain fight would help someone else dealing with an overreaching HOA. I framed the property survey and hung it in my garage. A reminder that knowing your rights and standing up for them mattered. Also, a reminder to always check property lines before installing permanent structures. The neighborhood continued to improve. Gerald's term as president was so successful that he ran unopposed for re-election. The roads got repaved. The community center got a fresh coat of paint. Someone organized a holiday lights contest that brought everyone together. During the contest, I went all out with lights and decorations. My house looked like Christmas had exploded on it. I won third place and a $50 gift card to a local restaurant. Brenda's old house, where Greg still lived, had tasteful white lights along the roofline. Greg told me he had spent hours putting them up, enjoying the freedom to decorate however he wanted without Brenda criticizing every choice. "She always insisted on those weird icicle lights that look cheap," he said. "I like these better. They look great. Hey, thanks for everything. I know that sounds weird, but dealing with all that fountain drama kind of gave me the courage to stand up for myself in other ways. I am happier now. I am glad something good came out of it." 2 years after the fountain incident, I was elected to the HOA board myself, not as president, just as a regular board member. I figured if I was going to benefit from good HOA leadership, I should help maintain it. My first board meeting was surreal. I was sitting at the same table where Brenda had once held court, making absurd demands and threatening residents. Now, we were discussing practical things like tree trimming schedules and pool maintenance contracts. A resident came to the meeting with a complaint about a neighbor's barking dog. Instead of immediately issuing fines and violations, we talked it through. Turned out the dog was barking because it was left outside all day while the owners worked. We connected them with a local dog walker who could help. Problem solved without any conflict. That was how an HOA was supposed to work, solving problems, not creating them. During my time on the board, I pushed for clearer rules about property lines and community improvements. Any new structure or modification had to be surveyed and approved by the county first, not just the HOA board. It cost a bit more upfront, but prevented exactly the kind of disaster the fountain had caused. I also helped implement a rule that violation notices had to be reviewed by at least 2 board members before being sent. No more single person wielding that power arbitrarily. The changes made a real difference. Complaints dropped. Participation in community events went up. People started to see the HOA as a helpful organization instead of an adversarial one. I ran into Brenda one last time, 3 years after the fountain incident. I was at a home improvement store in Scottsdale, looking at sprinkler systems. She was in the next aisle, arguing with an employee about a return policy. "I am a premium customer," she was saying. "You need to make an exception." "Madam, the policy is clearly posted. No returns after 90 days. I want to speak to your manager." I quietly moved to a different aisle. Some things never changed, but most things did change, and for the better. My neighborhood was proof that even a bad situation could turn around with the right people willing to stand up and do the work. The corner where the fountain had been was now my favorite part of my yard. The wildflowers bloomed in the spring, attracting hummingbirds and butterflies. Sometimes I would sit on my porch and look at that spot, remembering the absurdity of the whole situation. A fountain. All that drama over a fountain built in the wrong place by someone who refused to admit a mistake. But it taught me something valuable. Property rights matter. Legal documentation matters. Standing up for yourself matters. And communities work best when leadership serves residents instead of ruling over them. My story spread beyond just the neighborhood. Someone posted about it on a Reddit forum about HOA horror stories. It got thousands of upvotes and comments. People shared their own experiences with overreaching HOAs. Some asked for advice on how to handle similar situations. I created a simple guide based on what I learned: know your property lines. Get an official survey if you do not have one. Document everything. Photos, emails, letters, dates, times. Understand your legal rights. HOAs have power, but it is not unlimited. Use official channels. County code enforcement, legal counsel, police if necessary. Build community support. You are probably not the only one frustrated. Be patient but persistent. The system is slow, but it works. Do not escalate unnecessarily, but do not back down from what is right. That guide helped several people dealing with their own HOA nightmares. I got thank you messages from strangers who successfully fought back against unjust violations and illegal fees using the strategies I outlined. One woman in Texas had her HOA trying to force her to remove solar panels that were completely legal under state law. She used my guide, got her documentation together, and won her case. The HOA had to pay her legal fees and update their bylaws to comply with state solar access laws. A man in Florida had his HOA claiming his boat trailer violated community standards, even though he kept it in his garage. He proved it using documentation and photos, and the HOA dropped the violation. These stories reminded me that my ridiculous fountain fight had a purpose beyond just my own property. It was part of a larger conversation about power, rights, and how communities should function. 5 years after the fountain, my neighborhood was unrecognizable from what it had been under Brenda's leadership. We had new playgrounds, regular community barbecues, a book exchange library in the community center, and a reputation as one of the friendliest neighborhoods in Scottsdale. Property values had gone up, not because of aggressive enforcement of petty rules, but because people actually wanted to live there. Happy communities attracted good residents. It was that simple. I was sitting on my porch one evening when a new neighbor stopped by. She had just moved in the week before. "I heard you were the guy with the fountain story," she said. I laughed. "Word travels. That story is actually why I bought here." I read about it online and thought, if this is a community where residents can stand up to an abusive HOA and actually win, that is where I want to live. Well, welcome to the neighborhood. Thanks. And seriously, thank you for fighting that fight. It matters. After she left, I sat there thinking about legacy. I had never intended to become the face of HOA resistance. I just wanted a fountain moved off my property. But sometimes standing up for something small becomes standing up for something bigger. The parking lot that had flooded was now repaved and well maintained. The drainage system had been upgraded as part of the repairs. No one looking at it now would ever guess it had once been ankle-deep in water because of a petty dispute, but I remembered, and every time I drove past it, I smiled. The fountain money, after all the fines were paid and the fountain was sold, had become a cautionary tale in HOA management circles. Gerald sometimes spoke at regional HOA conferences about proper governance and respecting property rights. He always mentioned the fountain incident as an example of what not to do. $14,000 in fines, $2,000 in private investigator fees, unknown amounts in legal fees, and countless hours of conflict, he would say. All because we would not spend a day moving a fountain. The cost of ego is always higher than the cost of admitting a mistake. I went to one of his talks and was surprised by how many HOA board members were there, taking notes, asking questions. Many of them seemed genuinely interested in doing better, in avoiding the mistakes that Brenda had made. There were still bad HOAs out there, still power-hungry board members who saw residents as subjects instead of neighbors. But there were also people trying to change that culture, trying to make HOAs what they were supposed to be, helpful organizations that maintained community standards while respecting individual rights. My fountain story became a small part of that change. Not because I did anything heroic, but because I did not back down when I was right. 7 years after the fountain, I was ready to sell my house. I had gotten a job offer in Colorado and decided to take it. Leaving the neighborhood was bittersweet. I had fought for this place, had helped make it better, and now I was moving on. The real estate agent told me my house would sell quickly. The neighborhood's reputation was excellent. "You are in one of the most desirable communities in Scottsdale," she said. "People love it here." My house sold in 3 days. The buyers were a young couple with a baby. They loved the wildflower garden on the corner of the property. "This is beautiful," the wife said during the walkthrough. "Did you plant all of this?" "I did. There used to be a fountain there, but I like the flowers better." I did not tell them the whole story. They would hear about it eventually from neighbors. It had become part of the neighborhood lore. On my last day in the house, Gerald came by to say goodbye. "You know, you changed this place," he said. "Changed it for the better. You did that, not me. You started it. You stood up when it mattered." We shook hands and I drove away from Sunset Ridge for the last time. Colorado was different, beautiful in new ways. I bought a house in a community near Boulder. It had an HOA, but after extensive research, I confirmed they were reasonable. No horror stories. No power-hungry board members. Just normal people maintaining common areas and organizing the occasional yard sale. Still, the first thing I did was get an official property survey, and I kept copies of everything, just in case. I stayed in touch with people from Sunset Ridge through social media. The neighborhood continued to thrive. Gerald served 2 more terms as president before stepping down. A woman named Sarah took over, continuing his common-sense approach to governance. Brenda moved out of state eventually. I heard she tried to join an HOA board in Nevada, but was rejected when they checked her references. Turns out having a record of harassment and false police reports does not look good on an HOA board application. Greg remarried. His new wife was wonderful, the complete opposite of Brenda. He posted photos of them hiking and traveling, doing all the things he had never felt free to do before. 10 years after the fountain incident, I was contacted by a journalist writing an article about HOA reform. She had found my story online and wanted to interview me. "Your case has been cited in several property law textbooks," she told me. "It has become a standard example of property rights versus HOA authority." Really? Law professors use it to teach about documentation, proper legal channels, and the limits of HOA power. You are kind of famous in property law circles. The article came out a month later in a national publication. It told the story of the fountain, the fight, and the larger issues at play. It included interviews with HOA experts, legal scholars, and residents from Sunset Ridge. The article sparked a broader conversation about HOA reform. Several states introduced legislation to limit HOA authority and create clearer appeals processes for residents. None of it passed immediately, but the conversation was happening. I never set out to be an advocate or an activist. I just wanted a fountain moved. But that simple demand had rippled out in ways I never expected. Looking back, I do not regret any of it. Not the stress, not the conflict, not even the keyed car or stolen trash cans. Because in the end, it was about something important, standing up for what was right, even when it was difficult. Especially when it was difficult, the fountain itself, I heard, ended up at a golf course in Phoenix. It still functions, still spurts water in 3 tiers. But now it sits on property where it is supposed to be, where it was wanted, where no one had to fight to have it removed. And on the corner of a lot in Scottsdale, wildflowers still bloom every spring. A small, beautiful reminder that sometimes you have to flood a parking lot to make a point.